Hello guys, and happy Halloween to everyone out there. With it being Halloween, I really wanted to make a video this weekend, but I really didn't have any ideas on where to go or what to do. So I figured, why not take a walk through the cemetery? This is a cemetery I have featured on my channel here a few times, but it is a really interesting cemetery and very historic. This is the Westminster Cemetery in Westminster, Maryland. I'm going to take you through and tell you some of the stories that I know about related to the cemetery, and also just explore a little bit, see if we can find anything that I haven't seen before while I was here. Most of the time, the cemetery is pretty quiet. It's right in the center of Westminster. It's a square-shaped cemetery, and it's also still an active cemetery. So this part I'm in right now is the front of it, so we're gonna see a lot of the older graves up here, while once we get to the top of the hill, that's where we'll start to shift to more modern graves. So let's go around and see what we can find here. There's the street going straight to Main Street, Westminster, and we're right here at the beginning of the cemetery, and I'm going to take you over to the grave of William Winchester. William Winchester died in 1790 at the age of 80. He was born in England. He came over to the colony of Maryland. He was part of the Revolutionary War, and he was the founder of the town of Westminster, Maryland. Now, originally this town was named Winchester, Maryland, but there is also a nearby town named Winchester, Virginia, not too far from here. And the problem they were having was all the mail was being sent to the wrong place. So in order to stop that confusion, they renamed the town Westminster, Maryland, which was the area in England where William Winchester was from, Westminster. So the town was renamed Westminster. And right next to him is his wife, who died in 1809 at the age of 82. So as we continue on here at the Westminster Cemetery, you can see that we have a lot of old graves in front of us. This cemetery really is this town's history. There are a lot of original old buildings from the 1800s on Main Street out there, and I'm sure those buildings have a lot of ghost stories. Unfortunately, all of them are privately owned, but here in the cemetery we have all these residents who lived around here, who had an impact on this community at one point or another, who are laid to rest here forever. Some of these people may have just passed through here at one time and decided to make this place their home. And some of them, well, honestly, back in the day, if you passed away here and you were traveling from one place or another, if people wanted you buried, you would probably have been buried here. And that is actually the case for one of these guys right here. So these are graves of Civil War veterans. Now, one of these soldiers actually passed away after the Battle of Gettysburg. This Westminster, Maryland is about 30 minutes from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania in today's world by car. Back then, a lot of soldiers leaving Gettysburg would have passed through Westminster here, and one of them did, and he was injured. and he actually passed away here in Westminster, and he is buried right here. Now, I never found out what grave is his exactly. Not all these graves do have years on them. In fact, only one of them actually does, and that's this grave right here. But obviously he passed away in 1907, so that was almost 50 years after Gettysburg. But all these graves right here, all 5 of them are Civil War veterans. Like many old cemeteries, especially on the East Coast, you can start to see the damage to these old graves. Almost like they become part of nature again, in a way. You know, and it makes me wonder, seeing graves like this, you know, how many graves were here at one time that maybe got destroyed, that aren't here anymore? Like, for instance, this open space right here. At one time, was there a grave here? I mean, even looking down right now, I see a marker right here of someone. Now, for those of you who don't know, a lot of times when families couldn't afford actual graves that had names and dates, they would just have their loved one buried with a marker that indicated there was someone buried there. So this is just a marker right here of M. So that's why that's here like that. There's another one right here. It's another M marker. So back in the day, I don't know if they still do this actually in cemeteries, because of how, I don't know how they do burials now, but back in the day, if you could not afford a grave for your loved one with a name, you would just have a marker. And there are quite a few of these here, and I'm pretty sure there are a lot under the grass that are gone, that are buried now and unknown. I mean, I'm pretty sure the cemetery has records, but to just someone walking through here, I don't know if there's any burial here or not. Now, I'm back at the grave of Mr. William Winchester. I forgot to show you guys something. He actually has a plaque by his grave that says Revolutionary Patriot. So that's pretty cool. We have a grave of a Vietnam veteran right here who passed away in February. It looks like he just got his grave in. It looks really nice and looks like it was just placed here. So we have a World War II veteran right here. I think it's really cool to look at the graves of our veterans from all the wars. As you saw in the beginning, there was some graves up front from Civil War veterans, William Winchester, Revolutionary War. We have Vietnam, World War II. I'm sure we have World War I veterans. Probably not in this area, but maybe over that area where we were earlier. So we have a little bit of everyone who served part of this country's history. Another World War II veteran right here. We have right here a Korean War veteran. Let's clean his grave off for him so it doesn't get buried. Hang with me, guys. I just want to make sure this veteran's name can be read by everyone who walks through here and not be forgotten. Robert L. Burks, Korea. I'm making my way up the hill now to take a look at the other side of the cemetery. That's where we just were. A lot of modern graves, or pretty much all those graves were modern graves within the last 20 years or so. Now we're getting back to some of the older graves here. Let's see, this one, this person passed away in 1904. I know it looks like it could possibly be a 9, but obviously that's a 0. And this style of grave was not used in 1994. It's quite a quiet day here on the day before Halloween. Right here in the town of Westminster. We're now on the other side of the cemetery. As we look behind us. And we're back to some pretty old graves here. It is really quiet out here. It is really quiet. It's peaceful. And it's interesting just to look through here and see what stands out. Any interest in graves, architecture-wise, or any stories I've heard about certain legends of Westminster, if those people are buried here. Now, after I leave the Westminster Cemetery, I'm going to go right across the street to that church right there, because there's a cemetery there, and it has a few people buried there that have some stories, and I'm going to share them with you. In this part of the cemetery, I'm getting the scent of dryer sheets that you would put in the dryer, like scented dryer sheets. I'm pretty sure it's coming from one of these houses, you know, if someone's using the dryer. But it smells pretty good, honestly. Here's a crypt right here. Or mausoleum, I should say. Probably the only one, I think, in the cemetery. The individuals buried in this mausoleum here died in the year 1920 and 1949. you don't see too many mausoleums on the East Coast, or at least in the mid-Atlantic region of the East Coast. I know down in Florida there's a lot of mausoleums, but usually they are a symbol of money, you know, because they cost a lot to build mausoleums, especially during this time period in the 20th century. You know, it's a symbol. Obviously, looks like there had been some damage to this part. It had been fixed. So, yeah, that's the only mausoleum I see in this cemetery here. I'm now across the street from the Westminster Cemetery. I'm here at the grave of John William Murray, who was a Confederate soldier who died here on June 29th, 1863 in Westminster, Maryland. A few days before the Battle of Gettysburg, the Union Army was guarding the railroads here in Westminster, when under General Jeb Stuart's command, the Confederates came to town. There was a skirmish known as Corbett's Charge right here on the streets of Westminster. Shots rang out. One of the casualties was John William Murray, a Confederate soldier. Originally, he was to be buried in the Westminster Cemetery across the street, but locals at the time did not want one of the Confederate soldiers who died here to be buried in their cemetery. So he was accepted here at this church and presented a final resting place. Now, another grave here that has a lot of story and legend behind it is the grave right behind the Confederate soldier's grave is the grave of League Masters. Now, League Masters lived here during the pre-Revolutionary era, and he owned a iron furnace company where he made all sorts of metal stuff. He was originally from England. He came to the colony of Maryland and built his furnace company. Now, he wasn't really liked by locals because he was an English loyalist. And during the time of the Revolutionary War, he pretty much feared for his life, for mobs and all sorts of stuff. So he fled Maryland and left his company in the hands of someone else. And he fled to the Caribbean and lived there until the end of the war. Once things settled down here in the new country of America, he came back to find his company in ruins. He pretty much lived the rest of his life trying to rebuild this company, but it never got as successful as it was before. He died in 1796 and was buried on his property, which is about 10 minutes from here by car. Now, other than not really being liked by locals, the legend of him there's a story. Now, it's a legend. It hasn't been proven by anyone. But the legend is that League Masters had slaves working in his company, on his furnace plant, I guess you could call it, like a farm. And League Masters attacked a woman one night. League Masters apparently was treating one of the slaves badly, or did something wrong, and it was a female slave. And her husband got really offended by that. So he went to try to kill League Masters for revenge. Well, League Masters was having none of that, and he pretty much took them both, and it's believed he took them both and threw them in a furnace and burned them alive. Now, this is just legend. There's no fact behind it, but in the 1930s, his old house was being renovated by the owners, and they discovered a hidden room. And in that hidden room, they found skeleton remains. Now, also, there's no fact behind that, but there was a newspaper article from the time period which highlighted that. So the legend continues, how did League Masters end up here in this cemetery if he was originally buried on his property? Well, the legend is that his bones kept coming up through the ground. They would not stay buried. But the fact behind that was One of the owners at the time when he was moved here was mining underground around the property, and because of the vibrations, it caused the earth to move, and his bones pretty much became exposed, his skeletal remains. And the owner of the property just didn't want to have League Masters there anymore. He wasn't related to him. He didn't ever know anyone in the family. He just wanted him gone. So the church here accepted the body of League Masters, and he was brought here and laid to rest here for good. Now, he did have a different gravestone here just a few years ago, but it was old and outdated, and it had a crack going through it, and a lot of people said that crack was League Masters' bones trying to resurface again, part of the legend. So League Masters got this new grave a few years ago, and again, nothing about League Masters is a fact for sure. It's legend. All we can say is that he was from England, that he was an English loyalist, and he did own a furnace company around Westminster, Maryland during the Revolutionary War. That's all we can say for sure. But this is one of the legends of Westminster, Maryland. So here at this church, we have League Masters, and we have John William Murray, a Confederate soldier who fell here in Westminster, Maryland. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, comment, subscribe. Until next time, this is Fixed Image saying peace.